Hi, I'm William Vokey. Please make a donation to Carnegie's annual fund. Your donations directly support programs like the video you're about to watch. These are difficult times. Help keep alive these voices for ethics. Visit carnegiecouncil.org, click the heading Mark Support. Thanks.
Now, while frankly a number of people have criticized the president lately for not immediately embracing what General McChrystal has said, I actually think this is the process actually working. He told what's required there. Now let's put that in the broader context. And in my humble opinion, U.S. foreign policy for the last decade has never suffered from spending too much time trying to figure out what the heck we ought to be doing. So I don't think this necessarily is all that bad. These efforts then have got to be put in that broader context. If you just think about CENTCOM for a second, what challenges do you have? Well, you still have over 100,000 soldiers there in Iraq. And of course, we've seen some of the worst attacks in Iraq occur in the last couple of days. The great hope is that Iraq will have national elections in January. That will be another major step forward in the democratic process, bringing that country together. And then once those are concluded, we can see a more rapid departure of American forces from Iraq, hopefully seeing all combat forces out by the end of August of 2010 and all forces out by the end of 2011. But is that going to occur? Or are we going to see Iraq, for example, sink into more and more difficulties? You have pirates. You have al-Qaeda operating in Somalia. You have al-Qaeda operating in Yemen. You have a whole host of broader issues that they have to be contended with. This is very busy. You know, one of the great things about the U.S. military since the invention of the computer is that we become captured by PowerPoint. I just borrowed these from CENTCOM. If this doesn't give you a headache, nothing will. But forget all that for a second, because I'm sure over there it's an eye test for the people over there on table 3. The main point of this, of course, is that as you see there, the bigger spikes are, of course, the combination of all various kinds of attacks that have occurred in Afghanistan since about 2004. The overall impression is what's important. The level of violence roughly has doubled since around July of 2006, from about 200 attacks now to about 400 attacks occurring every single month. They have been somewhat seasonal. The troughs you see there in violence in Afghanistan are unlike what you would see in Iraq, which were more steady state. Why is that? Winter. Winter in Afghanistan tends to be periods when violence drops off. Snow is in the mountains, more difficult for the Taliban to move back and forth from Pakistan. And as a consequence, it has been somewhat cyclical. I would dare say in the next month, we'll see some reduction in violence in November and December, simply because that's normally what has transpired in the past. We all know what largely happened in Afghanistan, and we know what happened in Afghanistan was in 2002, following the American invasion. We turned our backs on Afghanistan, believing that we had pretty well secured that country, and became embroiled more and more in the conflict leading up to the invasion of Iraq. If you talk to Afghans, by the way, about that war back in 2001 and 2002, they see it very differently. They see it as the Afghans deposing the Taliban government, because the ground forces in that conflict were Afghan. The United States provided air support, the United States provided special operations forces, but the ground forces were in fact largely Afghan. And from that period on, that assumption of success overriding things, as the U.S. became more and more embroiled in Iraq, Afghanistan became, as I used to refer to it when I used to speak about this at CBS, as the truly forgotten war, the Korean War oftentimes being referred to as the forgotten war. And in military parlance, Afghanistan became an economy of force operation. What could we do to kind of keep things about where it was in hopes of eventually turning our attention back here should we need to do that? If you want to look at high-profile attacks, and again, for those of you that are at some distance, those in red are the total. The green is personal-borne IEDs, improvised explosive device, the weapon of choice by terrorists and insurgents in both Afghanistan and Iraq. Suicide vehicles in dark blue, and vehicle improvised explosive devices in light blue. Well, again, the bottom line is what's important. Casualty levels have increased. Part of that is a response to what we're doing as well as what the Taliban is doing. The President, for example, announced in the spring an additional 21,000 U.S. forces to go to Afghanistan They comprised of 3 brigades of about 17,000 troops and about 4,000 who would go over to work in training and organizing the Afghan forces. Well, as we send more forces in theater, they are doing more things. They are conducting more operations. They are conducting operations in places that have been sites of increased security problems. And as a consequence, there's more military operations, there's more violence, there's more casualties. The Taliban has also begun to change its modus operandi. Here you see casualties, civilian casualties in red, Afghan forces in green, and US forces and NATO forces in dark blue. What the Taliban have begun to do more directly was target civilians, particularly with suicide attacks. More and more attacks being suicide attacks, which were until about 2006 unheard of in Afghanistan. We've seen that just in recent days, albeit in Pakistan with the attack yesterday in what's called the women's marketplace in Pakistan, with most of the killed being either women or children. So an effort to intimidate, and never forget, a terrorist's objective is just that, to terrorize and intimidate over time, and that's certainly what we see them doing.